The movie unfolds in the border city of Nogales, Mexico, where Brian, a rugged man living alone in a makeshift camper-like house, gets a haunting nightmare of his wife being brutally attacked by a group of men. To escape these tormenting visions, Brian throws himself into the discipline of martial arts, dedicating his days to rigorous training. Meanwhile, a young man named Oscar, who lives in the same neighborhood, observes Brian's martial arts sessions from a distance. Oscar is deeply inspired by Brian's prowess and longs to learn the art of fighting. Oscar's daily routine involves watching Brian's training before heading off to school. As the day progresses, Oscar finds himself trailed by a group of thugs in a car. Instinctively, he senses danger and attempts to evade them, seeking refuge behind a parked car on the roadside. Little does he know that Brian is silently observing his encounter and learns that Oscar's determination to acquire martial arts skills is driven by a desperate need for self-defense. At night, the same thugs show up at Oscar's house, confronting him at gunpoint. It's revealed that they're part of Oscar's gangster brother Hector's crew and often extort money from Oscar despite his innocence. Oscar complies and hands over his money without resistance. The following morning, Oscar returns to the training field, looking for Brian. To his surprise, Brian approaches him and invites Oscar to join his training. Thrilled, Oscar begins learning defensive moves from Brian, dedicating himself to training, gaining confidence, and improving his skills. Over a couple of weeks, Oscar's fear of Hector's gang members diminishes, and he confronts them. In the next scene, Oscar asks Brian to set up an underground fight to test his newfound abilities. However, Brian refuses, emphasizing that the skills he taught Oscar are meant for self-defense, not professional fights. Hearing this, Oscar becomes angry and storms out of the place. Outside the training facility, Oscar is taken aback when he spots his older brother Hector and his group of friends waiting for him. Overjoyed to see his brother again, Oscar approaches Hector with a warm embrace as they engage in conversation. Brian arrives on the scene, and Hector, sensing an unfamiliar presence, becomes suspicious. He questions Oscar about Brian, wondering if he's a law enforcement officer. In reply, Oscar reassures his brother, explaining that Brian is his martial arts teacher and poses no threat. Hector, a gangster who has always hoped Oscar would join his criminal activities, expresses his desire for his younger brother to become a part of his world. However, Oscar resists, wanting to lead a normal life and stay away from the criminal underworld. Despite their differing paths, Hector invites Oscar to celebrate his return with a party. Initially hesitant, Oscar eventually agrees and gets into Hector's car to join the festivities. The scene then shifts to a lively bar where Hector and his group revel in the company of girls. Oscar, however, feels out of place and expresses his desire to return home. Hector then suggests taking Oscar to witness an underground fight later, which piques his interest. After a while, the group is engrossed in watching an underground live fight with bets placed on the outcome. The referee announces a tempting prize of $10,000 for anyone who can defeat their champion fighter known as the Collector. Oscar, inspired by his recent martial arts training, decides to enter the ring, much to his brother's surprise. Using the fighting techniques he learned from Brian, Oscar swiftly defeats the Collector, astonishing everyone. He claims the prize money and, with newfound confidence, is no longer intimidated by Hector's associates. Unbeknownst to them, a bystander in the crowd records the fight and uploads it to the internet. Meanwhile, in Orange County, California, Pero, a criminal lawyer, receives an emergency call and is sent the video of Oscar's underground fight. Pero is taken aback by what he sees and immediately contacts his boss, the criminal kingpin Sonny Kilbane. Although Sonny is incarcerated, he still wields considerable power within the prison. Pero presents the video of Oscar's fight to Sonny, who is equally astonished. He then instructs Pero to locate the fighter and start investigating the identity of Brian, whom they suspect might be Oscar's instructor. There appears to be a connection between Brian and their criminal enterprise, and Oscar's fighting technique closely resembles Brian's distinctive style. Without delay, Pero reaches out to their hitman in Mexico, tasking them with the mission of finding and eliminating Brian. In the next scene, Oscar, still seeking opportunities for underground fights, makes his way to a local fight club and approaches the receptionist Marisol. He inquires about obtaining a membership, eager to continue testing his newfound skills. However, to his disappointment, Marisol informs him that club memberships are only available to individuals aged 18 and older. Dejected but not without charm, Oscar flirts with Marisol and compliments her looks before leaving the club. Following this, Oscar, accompanied by his brother Hector and his group, pays a visit to Brian's residence. They implore Brian to resume Oscar's training and even go so far as to offer a substantial sum of money in exchange for his services. Brian, however, remains resolute in his decision to decline their offer. Tensions rise when Hector attempts to coerce Brian by brandishing a firearm. But Brian swiftly counters by drawing his own weapon and ordering them to leave his property, not before suggesting Oscar stay away from his brother. Following this, the two brothers, Oscar and Hector, return to the fight club that had earlier denied Oscar membership due to his age. Hector proceeds to sign the necessary guardian papers, securing Oscar's admission as a club member. During this time, Marisol recognizes Oscar as the fighter who defeated the Collector in the underground match and even shares the video footage of the fight with him. As they converse, two unfamiliar individuals, the Gonzalez brothers, enter the club and begin questioning Oscar about his trainer Brian. Before Oscar can respond, Hector intervenes and inquires about the identity of the newcomers. The Gonzalez brothers initially claim to be owners of their own fight club, but when Hector expresses doubt, they disclose their true intent. They are hunting Brian. Hector, not revealing any knowledge of Brian's whereabouts, suggests that the Gonzalez brothers exit the club. After the Gonzalez brothers depart, Hector confides in Oscar, explaining the true nature of the twin brothers as hitmen with the intent to harm Brian. Hearing this, Oscar insists on informing Brian about the danger he faces and asks Marisol to accompany them. Shortly thereafter, the group arrives outside Brian's residence, and Marisol relays Oscar's request for a conversation. Brian agrees, and Oscar proceeds to inform him about the Gonzalez brothers and their pursuit of his life. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Brian urges everyone to enter his house promptly, as he suspects that the Gonzalez brothers might have been tailing them and could pose an imminent threat. Brian's words turn out to be true, and the Gonzalez brothers open fire at them, killing two of Hector's friends. Fortunately, Hector, Brian, Oscar, and Marisol manage to seek refuge inside Brian's bulletproof home just in the nick of time. After losing his group members, Hector directs his anger and grief at Brian, holding him responsible for the death of his friends. He then demands an explanation for why the hitmen were after him. Here, Brian reluctantly reveals his past as a police officer who had successfully apprehended the notorious drug lord Sonny Kilbane several years ago. After Sonny's arrest, Brian had been living anonymously in the area, hoping to remain beyond the reach of cartel members seeking revenge. However, he remains perplexed as to how the Gonzalez brothers discovered his location. Right then, Marisol suggests that it might be due to the underground fight Oscar participated in, which was subsequently uploaded to the internet. Brian, furious at Oscar's disobedience, exits the house but not before instructing Hector to pass by the window in a few minutes. Next, Brian is outside the house, hiding behind some bushes, aiming his crossbow at one of the Gonzalez brothers. Following Brian's instructions, Hector walks past the window, diverting the attention of the brothers. Seizing this opportunity, Brian releases the crossbow bolt, killing one of the Gonzalez brothers. Unbeknownst to them, the remaining Gonzalez brother, driven by vengeful determination, approaches Brian's residence and begins pouring gasoline over it, intending to set it ablaze. However, before he can carry out his plan, Brian confronts him, leading to a fierce confrontation between the two. After a heated scuffle, Brian gains the upper hand and presses the remaining Gonzalez brother for information about their employer. Regrettably, the stubborn hitman refuses to reveal any details and, in a final desperate act, ignites himself, succumbing to the flames and taking his secrets with him. Next, Brian re-enters the house and advises Oscar and the others to evacuate as swiftly as possible. He suspects that the Gonzalez brothers may have called for reinforcements, and an imminent threat could be on the horizon. Brian then guides the group through a concealed tunnel, urging them to look after themselves before departing. Later at night, as Brian predicted, a group of henchmen assaults his base. Nevertheless, he manages to fight against them and drive them away. The following day, Hector arrives outside Brian's residence to check on him, but is met with a surprising sight. The scene appears entirely cleared, as if no gunfight events had transpired the previous night. Hector assumes that Brian may have left Mexico in the wake of the chaos and conveys this information to Oscar. Hearing this news, Oscar is deeply saddened, as he holds great respect and admiration for Brian as his teacher. After this, when Hector visits one of his friend's fiancées, he is surrounded by the same group of henchmen who attacked Brian's house the previous night. They take him hostage and urge him to reveal the location of Brian. To their bad luck, Hector refuses to provide them with any information, compelling the group leader to point a gun at him. Fortunately, before he can pull the trigger, Brian arrives there holding a machine gun and kills each one of the thugs in one go. He then rescues Hector, and the two drive towards the town in a luxury car. On the other hand, Oscar and Marisol arrive outside Brian's house, hoping that he's still inside. Right then, a group of soldiers attacks them, and Oscar fights them with ease. Amid the chaos, one of the soldiers, a man named Eric, approaches Oscar and begins speaking to him. Eric assures Oscar that their intention is not to harm Brian, but rather to save him. He drops a bombshell by revealing that he is one of Brian's former students, and somewhat surprisingly, Oscar believes him. Following this revelation, Marisol and Oscar get into Eric's car, and together with him, they embark on a journey to search for Brian. However, after driving a distance, Oscar realizes that Eric is taking them to a different place rather than to the city. He then signals Marisol to open the GPS tracking and calls Hector, informing him that they're with a cop, Eric. As soon as Brian hears the name Eric, he suggests Oscar be on high alert and not trust Eric, as he is a dirty cop. In the next scene, Eric leads Oscar to another location, the mansion of a drug lord named Caesar. There, Eric presents Oscar before Caesar and Pero, and proposes the idea of using Oscar to locate Brian and eliminate him. Meanwhile, Brian assembles a diverse group of allies, including police officers, criminals, and drug mafia members, to assist him in his mission. Hector, taken aback by the eclectic mix of individuals in Brian's group, decides to focus on the task at hand. Brian's forces launch an attack on Caesar's mansion, sparking a fierce gunfight between them and Caesar's henchmen. Upon realizing that the battle is escalating, Caesar shoots Pero, mentioning that he is no longer needed, and joins the fight against Brian's troops. Next, Brian and Hector manage to enter the mansion and one by one kill most of the opponents. Eric then proceeds to use Oscar as a hostage to threaten Brian, but to his dismay, Oscar fights back and subdues him. At the same time, Marisol gets a gun and shoots Eric's legs, injuring him badly. Brian also arrives there and is very happy to see Oscar and Marisol alive and unharmed. Afterward, Brian escorts them out of the house but gets spotted by Caesar, who begins shooting at them. Fortunately, Hector comes to the rescue and eliminates Caesar, shooting right at his head with a shotgun. Later, real cops arrive there and take control of the entire scene. Hector talks to them and says that he's no longer associated with gangs and has come out clean. Here, Brian gets united with his fiancée, and Oscar and Marisol also hold their hands tightly. In the last scene, Sonny Kilbane is brought to an interrogation room by a group of soldiers, and he is shocked when they hold him at knife point. The movie ends with Brian revealing himself in front of Sonny as one of the soldiers and passing him with an evil smile.